Hello everybody, welcome to this episode of Activist Lawyer. I am in a very snowy Newry today in the Granite podcast studio. There's not too many about, but I am absolutely delighted to be joined via Zoom by Darren Lalor, barrister. Thank you, Darren, for joining me today.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me.
So a brief bio just for some of our listeners. We're not going to go into too much detail because Darren will take us through his background and his journey into law, which is really, really inspiring and really unique, and I think will appeal to many, many of our listeners. But suffice to say that Darren is a junior counsel working in Dublin. He ordinarily works in the district court and is a criminal defence barrister, which is something we're going to get into, the nuts and bolts around that in today's podcast. Darren had many, many jobs before he became a barrister through the King's Inn. The last job that he did was a taxi driver, and that's where he started to study law while driving his taxi. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Back in 2008, he also worked with Aslan, the Dublin-based band, and he had many other hats, as he says, that all fed into his journey into law, very much supported by his wonderful wife, Fiona, who he met again when she asked for guitar lessons when he'd picked her up as a customer. And so, yes, we're really, really, really excited to have Darren here and to have him share his wonderful story and really also to share the reality of working in the district court in criminal defence in Ireland these days. He'll also importantly share details about a protest on the 2nd of May, which he will highlight in terms of calling all barristers to come out across Ireland and protest for around legal aid fees for criminal defence barristers. So he'll go into that in detail, and I think this is a really, really great recording. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks a million for listening. Okay, so just with listeners there, I've gone through your bio, Darren, but maybe just in your own words, could you take us through your journey into law, because it's really, really fascinating, and I read a little bit about it in one interview that you did, and it was just very, very inspirational. But maybe we could go back a little bit in time just for our listeners to understand your unique journey.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love sharing my story with people because it just kind of helps me understand where it came from, and it kind of helps students and my children that anything is achievable at any stage of your life. I left school around 14. I went to De La Salle School in Finglas, and I went to Benetton College, which was the secondary school. I think it was around 14 I left secondary school. I had a job. I was working on milk rounds. I was doing coal rounds. I was delivering vegetables. And I had no real issues in school. I just left school. Mm-hmm. So everybody, I suppose, in their family has an aunt or an uncle or a relative who's always on their case about going back to school, and I do as well. I had an Auntie Hilda and I had an Uncle Brendan, and they were on my case all the time, you know. Yeah. We'd go for a wedding, Hilda be there on your case, Brendan be on your case, but in a nice way. Mm-hmm. Go back to school. But I was earning money. I was happy doing what I was doing. But then, as time moved on, I started to realise that leaving school at such an age was a very bad decision. I left school at 14. No education, so I've no leaving cert, group cert, inter cert, wherever the exams were at that time, and I've no leaving cert. So effectively, I went to the workforce, just me and my memories, if I can put it that way, my memories of being in school. But I worked hard, and I earned money. My dad taught us, keep go out working hard. They're always there to support us, and I made the bad decision to leave school, and it's as simple as that. So what happened was, I went working for an engineering company, and I was there for about maybe 8, maybe 9 years, and I love music, and I got an opportunity to kind of work with a couple of bands, and I eventually then got asked by Aslan, which is an Irish band based here in Dublin. But I worked with them, and I did. I hadn't got a clue where I was getting into. I knew nothing about instruments, nothing about guitars. I loved music. Yeah. And they kind of gave me that opportunity to go working with them. And I stayed with them for about maybe 3 or 4 albums. And unfortunately, then it ended. Mm-hmm. And my realisation started that I had nothing to fall back on. And it is quite as simple as that. I had put a taxi on the road. I was out driving the taxi one night, and I picked up 3 people. and one of them got in the front, two got in the back, and the girl in the front asked me for guitar lessons. And I said, "Oh God, no." And so I gave her my number. I said, "Ring me tomorrow. I'll get you somebody." So I got her somebody to give her guitar lessons, and she never left me alone since, And so we became friends. We got into a relationship, and eventually we got married. So I met her in a taxi. Yeah. So it's kind of like from affair to a taxi, not an affair, but from affair. Like, I think 47.50, I think was the fare. I did maybe 27.50, I can't remember. And it developed from there. But what Fiona works at St. James's Hospital. She's a nurse, and she encouraged me to go back to school.
Okay.
And she wanted me to study law or medicine. And I thought she was absolutely
law
mad,
or medicine.
Law or medicine. And I rang up my friend Steve, and I said, "Oh, she's telling me what to do already." There's chaos, panic. And so she said, "Go back and study law or medicine." We had no children at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went into Dublin Business School, and all the future students were there. Mm-hmm. They were getting ready to go into I did like an induction or an introductory day. And I went in and rattling. And I spoke to Barry Halton. I think Barry has passed away now. He's a barrister. And John O'Keefe, I think, was the dean at the time. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Look, come in. We'll support you." I said, "I have no exams. Don't worry about that. We'll support you. And we'll work out a business plan for your fees." And that's how it began.
So you chose law.
Simply.
Not medicine.
Well, I'll rephrase that. It was chosen for me. It was like, get in there and do that law now. And so I went back and I did law. Now, the difference with me, I was in my late mid-30s. Mm-hmm. I think it was around 2009. And I had a taxi on the road, and I didn't know how to study. I knew how to read, but I didn't know how to read properly. Like what was the important information on the page? What were the bits that we need to kind of narrow down? I could write, but when I was writing something, everything would go into the article or the page because I thought everything was important. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had to start back from scratch again. And Fiona was the main instrument in that, reincarnation, you could say, of me going back to school very late in life. Wow. I had to study in my taxi. People were in my taxi, I'd be sitting outside nightclubs with law books and sheets of paper, and I'd be reading while I'm waiting for people to come out of the nightclub and go into the taxi. And then I would read my notes into my phone, and then I would play them through the system of the car. Brilliant. And I'd be listening. Yeah, so I had to come up with all these ideas. Now, obviously, I wasn't listening to myself talking in the system of the car. When customers were in the car, I didn't want to bore them that much. And that's effectively how I learned. I started pulling into courts then, and the criminal courts of justice, and barristers were getting into the car. And one guy got into the car called Luigi Ray. And I didn't know who Luigi Ray was. I didn't know he's a barrister. And he asked me, was I in trouble? Because he's seen a law book sitting on the seat. And I said, "Yeah, I'm doing this law of evidence at the moment. I can't get my head around it." And he said, "Are you studying law?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, very good. And who's teaching you this and who's teaching you that?" And I told him. And he said, "Well, tell Barry Halton," he says, "who's teaching us evidence." I was asking for him. So I went to college that night, told Barry Halton Luigi Ray was asking for him. Obviously, they knew each other. I hadn't got a clue who Luigi Ray was. And I kept on going back to the courts. And Luigi was into the car fairly often. And then he took my phone number. Then he used to ring me up. "Oh, I'm going to a prison today. Can you bring us out?" Mm-hmm. And he used to say I was one of the only taxi men who didn't read a newspaper when they were waiting on customers. I was reading law books and notes. And so he said to me, I think it was in year 2 of my degree, because my law degree is over 3 years. Yeah. He says, "If you train as a barrister, if you become a barrister," he says, "I'll take you on as my devil." I hadn't got a clue what a devil was. I didn't know. And a devil is somebody who does let's say, when they qualify as a barrister, it's like a year's apprenticeship, if I can put it that way, where you'd be under the watch of a very senior barrister who'd be teaching you, I'm not going to say the tricks of the trade, but just to make sure that the knowledge you've acquired over so many years is properly applied to cases. So did my law degree, and then I had met a guard, Fergal McSherry, and he said to me in Dublin Business School, "Come on, we become barristers when we come out here," he said. And I thought he was mad. Went back home to Fiona. "Oh, he wants me to become a barrister." "Oh, you'd be great," she said. "We'll get that together now, Yeah. So Fiona put a thing in place where she's planning the rest of my life going into the King's Inns. So I get into the King's Inns, I did my entrance exams. I failed them first go, had to resit them a year later.
Okay.
And I get in, eventually I get in myself and Fergal. And
The
we
rest is
started training
history.
barristers, But the rest was history. I had to park my taxi up because we weren't earning much money on the taxi. And so I had to retrain again as a healthcare assistant.
As a
And then I
healthcare
had to go working
assistant?
in a
Wow.
healthcare assistant,
So you did that
I had to
while
go
you were
working in a
in
hospital.
King's Inn?
Yeah, I had to retrain because the deal was, or the recommend that was, no, the deal was, I'll put it that way. Fiona said, look, we had two children during my studies, and both of them were born. Katie Ellen was born in 2010, and Lola May was born in 2011, exactly the same day, 1 year apart. But they were born on the day of my exams. So Fiona was quite unwell during the first pregnancy. And I was at the end of her bed studying in when she was in hospital. And so Katie Ellen was born the day of my criminal exams, and we had to move those. And then a year later, Lola May was born on the day of my company law exams, and then we had to move those. So every challenge was we were faced with as we went along. So when something didn't work, we had to fix it. So I had to go retrain as a healthcare assistant, and I went working at St. James's Hospital. And I was mainly working with people with, we'd say difficulties, whether they had medical difficulties or social difficulties or mental difficulties. You'd be sitting with patients maybe for 13 hours a day, tending to their needs, or else I'd be working in the emergency department. So my life kind of started backwards, if I could put it that way. I did all the work late in life,
You sure did. So you're working in quite a difficult job, I would imagine, with a lot of responsibility, and that was new to you as well because you hadn't trained in that before. 2 very young babies, and studying for to become a barrister, which is no easy feat. And your wife obviously having had these children very close together. So it sounds to me like you did have good support around you. Is that right? Both from the perspective
we had
of
great
your
support.
training and
My
family.
dad, my mum and dad, and Fiona's family. My dad passed away during COVID recently.
Oh, sorry.
But I remember not recently, in 2021, which is, I suppose, quite recent.
It is, yeah.
I used to walk through the King's Inns with my dad on a Thursday when he used to get paid. He used to work in the bus station across from the King's Inns. And he used to hold his hand, and we used to walk through the King's Inns. And he used to say, what do they do in here, Dad? And he goes, oh, this is where they train judges, Yeah. And I was going, oh, fascinating. And I'd walk through. But little did I know, in my late 30s, I'd be sitting in there doing the entrance exams to get in.
Sure.
Me sitting in the King's Inns to do the entrance exams was a challenge and an accomplishment to me. But the support that Mum and Dad gave me, they were minding the kids. When I had to do exams to get assignments ready. Fiona moved out of the house into my mum and dad's when I was getting the exams ready. But all my friends, my family, they all kind of gathered round to get me that support to get the education because they knew it was important. Not only to me, but I just wanted to give my daughters just the example to never do things too late. But if you do, because of any circumstances, go back and try fix it. But don't be afraid to ask people for their help.
And a lot of people will say, oh, it's too late now. And, to go back and retrain in any discipline. But I mean, law isn't an easy one to get into, generally speaking, no matter what age you are. But you seem to have had the support there and the drive and the commitment to deal with any barriers and any obstacles that stood in your way. And certainly you didn't go in under the normal or the standard route, where somebody has been, in college, studied law, and they kind of know what direction they're going to take at a very, very young age. So that's just so unique. And I'm sure a lot of listeners will be really, pleased to hear that, your journey started off at a particular stage in your life and you stuck to it. And you're obviously completely focused on that. But can I ask you then, Darren, why criminal? Because, I mean, I think the core area of your work is criminal defence. Did you know that would be an area that you wanted to study, or were you quite open to what kind of area you wanted to practice in as a barrister?
Well, my master, Luigi Ray, when I came out of the King's Inns, Luigi, you could say, waited for me, so I failed the exams going in first go. So when he told me my second year of my law degree, he'd take me on as a master. And I think that was 2010, maybe 2011. It was 2015 when I came to practice at the bar. So he was my master. and he's a criminal practitioner. But I was always just drawn, even during my studies, to kind of like tort law, negligence and areas like that, but mainly crime, and I don't know why. I grew up in Finglas, it's a working class area of Dublin. Some of my friends I went to school with got into difficulties when they went along in their life. Members of my family got into difficulties. And I think for me, I got rehabilitated in some way to go back to school, to go back to college, and kind of make good all the things that I did wrong when I was growing up. And the things I did wrong was not going to school and not reaching out and getting that support and listening to people. So I think with criminal law was a natural progression to help people. Not only they have to face the court for what they're accused of doing, but hopefully getting supports in place where they can, become just that different member of society, somebody who's come off the drugs or, cure themselves from any addictions they have or seeking the supports that they need. But I was just drawn towards criminal law. I wanted to make that difference. And since 2015, when I came to the bar, I think I made some differences to people's lives, more so my own. More so my own.
Well, look, I mean, it's vital that in society, in any function in society, we have a robust and fair criminal justice system in place, and that everybody can access justice. And who knows, any of us can be in the position where we need to rely on a barrister to defend us, anybody. Which leads me on to my next question, which we're here to talk about today. In terms of payment for barristers and the campaign that you and your colleagues have commenced a number of years ago, which still continues, which really shocked me in terms of the rates of pay. And it really eats into the system itself. So can you just maybe speak about the current rates? And this is legal aid rates, isn't that correct, for criminal defence barristers in particular? What are the rates, Darren? Just bring us through that, and the type of work that you do in terms of, and the rates that apply to that work in particular.
Well, for some of your listeners who wouldn't be familiar with the criminal justice system, if I get into difficulty myself, let's say today, I'll be brought before the courts. I'll be brought before the district court, and in the district court, it's a court of summary jurisdiction. It'd be the court where most things will start off, whether they be murders, allegations of rape, they will start off there. But there's many matters that remain in the district court. So for the first appearance in the district court, I may have to meet the client in the cells, or I may have to meet the client, maybe they're not in custody at the time, and I'd have a consultation with them. And the fee I get paid for that day in court would be €25.20. Now, if the client is in custody, €25.20. Okay. And if the client is in custody, I may have to make a contested bail application where the guards are objecting to bail for many reasons, and they provide me with a booklet of reasons why they feel he or she should not be granted bail. And I would have to read through all this. I have to go back to the client. There'd be consultations with the guards. It'd be going back and forward. And then eventually we'd be in front of the judge making that application. And so that'd be €25.20. And when we're finished doing that work, we have to do a report for the solicitor to say, this is what happened on this day in court. Now, if a client was to plead guilty to any offence, he or she be bringing reports to court. Maybe they've had drug issues, maybe they have references from bosses, or maybe they have reports that the court wanted to see. So again, I'd have to meet the client, have consultations, read the documents, make copies of the documents, meet the guards, and then ask the court to deal with this matter in such an appropriate way by taking into account all the circumstances of the victim of the offence, but also the person who caused that victim to be hurt, or maybe they had stolen something, or maybe it was a public order matter. So it'll be €50.40 for me to be on my feet to ask the court in many instances maybe not to send somebody to jail, and maybe to send it to the probation services for other reports, just so the court can kind of get an idea where the person has come through in their life. But if the client wants to contest the case against them, we get paid €67 for that.
67.
And you could have as much. Yeah. So I'd be meeting with the client maybe days beforehand. I'd be with them again that morning. I'd be reading all the Garda statements. I'd be watching all the CCTV footage, and we'd arrive in the court. The hearing could be 2 hours, and that's on my feet for 2 hours. That's not taking into account the preparation.
Yeah.
The hearing could be half a day. and the basic fee for that is €67 that we get paid. Now, there is provision where we can ask the court to apply a circuit court rate to all the preparation that we have prepared for the case and for the hearing. And sometimes the court will give that, and then the fee for that would be around €572. Okay. And that's taking into account all the work that happens to prepare for the case, all the work that's going to happen after, all the consultations. But the courts don't grant those certificates of 572 all the time. So when we go into court, and we're going in with the hope of earning €25.20, €50.40, or €67, and that may be the only case that we have for the day. Because
I was going to ask that.
That case would take. That could be the one case, and it could take 3 or 4 hours, or it could be the one bail application, and it could take up to an hour, So and that's the situation that we're in.
So the time spent isn't factored in at all. So just to be clear, €25.20 for remand, €50.40 for a plea and mitigation at a sentence, basically. I know you've gone into a little bit more detail. And then €67 for a full hearing of a contested trial, which you might get granted a certificate for circuit court fees, but that doesn't happen all the time. But in no circumstances are the hourly rates, the time spent taken into account. Have you compared these rates to other jurisdictions, Darren, just to give us a picture of, is this the norm, and why are the rates, why haven't they changed, and when was the last change in the legal aid rates for the district court?
Well, in relation to other jurisdictions, and I just have it written here, and it's from, we did a petition to the Minister for Justice last year, and we had listed out some comparators just to let them see where Ireland is on the scale of things. And if I could just read a paragraph just for your listeners, that we had put in that according to a report compiled by the Department of Justice in 2018, and this is the Department of Justice in the Republic, that the state's funding for legal aid per capita of the population in Ireland was at €18.40. Now in England and Wales it was €38.14, and in Northern Ireland it was €73.53. So you can see that in relation to those figures, we're down at the end. Then we had another paragraph listing out the figures in relation to a European Convention report, which recorded Ireland as ranking the lowest in judicial system spending in 45 European states. So again, we can see Ireland coming in, at the low end of judicial spending and the low end of legal aid per capita spending in relation to the comparisons I've made. So we are low. We are very low. Some of my colleagues in England have saying they are shocked at the fees.
I'm sure they are.
We don't have an exact mark of exactly how they get paid or what amounts they get paid, but they are shocked at the amount of fees that are paid to barristers, and this is allowed to continue. In relation to how far it goes back, I've been told by my colleagues that I'm actually practicing today based on fees which were set over 20 years ago. It appears that we were the subject of FEMPI cuts, which were austerity financial emergency cuts, and it appears that many sectors have been restored their cuts, except for us. We haven't been restored our cuts, So it's not that we're asking for, a pay rise. We're basically asking for not even the money back.
No. Just
to be put in the position today that people were at 20 years. So what it really is that we're, the criminal justice system for barristers today in the district court is run off figures which were there 20 years ago.
Okay. Right. So
that's simply where we are.
Those payments are absolutely pitiful, and I'm so glad to hear that you've gone into the detail about it. So we're going to focus on that a little bit here, and maybe you'll just tell us. Nobody's letting this lie in your area of work, and you've been putting a lot of effort into highlighting this issue. What did you and your colleagues, or how did you come about starting, I think it's fair to say, a campaign to firstly raise the issue, but you're really taking an opportunity to put pressure on the minister to change these circumstances, which is absolutely correct to do so. So how did this all come about, Darren, and did you start it, or did you work with your colleagues in starting a campaign and a protest around this?
Well, like myself, Luigi Ray, William Moran and Donegal Craddock BL, we we came together because we were hearing on the ground, particularly at district court level, that people were just leaving the bar or leaving criminal law because of these fees. And more importantly, people were panicking and coming into practice criminal law, students who were in college at the moment, and students contacting me saying that they're not going to be able to survive on these rates. Now, I'm the lucky one. My wife is working, so I kind of have that backdrop. Some people are taking on second jobs. So if you look at the photograph of the protest last year on the steps, there were two of them. Some people in that photograph are working a second job to keep this job alive.
Really?
So we thought about what was the best way to do it. We decided that a protest was important to send a strong message to the government. And we had two protests. And the first one was in March of last year, and the second one was in April of last year. And then what we did was we had done a petition to the Minister for Justice, and that was signed by 88 senior counsel and 182 junior counsel. And quite simply, what the petition was asking for, we were setting out how bad things were, but quite simply what we were looking for was a direct claiming and payment mechanism for barristers in the district court. When you're in the higher courts, the state will pay you directly.
Okay.
But it's the solicitor who pays us. It's a split fee.
Yeah.
So the solicitor gives us half of what they get. So I have to run my practice based on my €25.20, but they have to run their practice, pay staff, holiday pay, so on and so forth, high insurance costs from their €25.20. And then we also asked for a direct payment system because we wanted to take the burden off the solicitors of having to chase up the legal aid fees so they could pay us, you know. So the paid status, if the state paid us directly, it meant that the state would be getting their tax straight away because they would get withholding tax straight away.
Yeah.
They tax us from source. We would get paid by the state directly, but also once the state pays us directly, it means that we were recognised by the state as practitioners in the district court, because the reality is we're not recognised as barristers in the district court. It's mainly a kind of a solicitor-based and solicitor-run practice. We do have counsel there, and counsel do run a lot of cases there, but it's really the solicitor who gets paid, and then they pay us, and then the third thing we were looking for was the immediate full unwinding of the penalty cuts for everybody, not only people at district court level, but for people in the circuit court and for people in the higher courts, because everybody are at fees, which looks like they're the same fees that they ran 20 years ago. Everything is rising. The cost of living has gone up. Our bar council fees have gone up 6%. So everybody's feeling the pinch. Yeah. But the reality is now my colleagues are starting to pinch themselves by saying it's time to move on. It's time to leave. We had two of them leaving yesterday. And so students are coming in. They're on the scrap heap of hope. The reality is their future is ending before they even get here. And it's important for us to go out on the steps, to send a message to government to say, we're not happy. And who's coming behind us, which is our future, is not happy either. So we have a second protest. Well, it's a third protest, but this year we have another protest on the 2nd of May. And this is a celebration of failure, we call it.
Celebration of failure. Yeah.
A celebration of failure. The Irish state, who have done nothing about this. They have talked about it. They've attended meetings about it. You get the same spin all the time. Minister McGrath, we were told, who was the public expenditure minister back then, he was taking a personal interest in this. We have a new minister now in that position, and we haven't heard from him. We don't know what's happening. We have a minister for justice, who is the then minister for justice, who supports us, but is leaving it into the hands of the public expenditure minister to unwind the cuts. So what we really have is a criminal justice system being put into a different department to see if it's going to survive, and to see if people at my level are going to survive.
Wow.
And that's where we are. So that's how the protest came about. Okay.
So, I mean, you've said there, let's not forget, I mean, you've mentioned, you're one of the lucky ones because, you've a wife who works. But in reality, I mean, this whole thing is completely unsustainable and quite shocking, to be frank. And not only is it damaging to barristers and, as you say, younger barristers and, people who are interested in getting into that area, but the administration of justice in general, because you are providing a vital public service. And if you're saying that people are discouraged from coming into practice in, the criminal defence, and people are dropping out. You've mentioned 2 people that you know this week. I mean, where does that leave people, people who need to access representation? I mean, that's a real worry too, surely.
Well, it's like the health service. When you go to see your doctor or your consultant or your GP, you want the best. You want the person who's very experienced. And if they can't give you what you need, they will send you onto a consultant. So you could say in reality, that we are the consultants, let's say, of the legal world. So we're not saying that the solicitor doesn't have the skill and the competence to deal with the cases we're dealing with. But they're running very busy offices where they're doing maybe, hundreds of cases a week. So we'd be lucky enough to get the brief from them. But what's happening now is that people are coming to court and they realise that the difficulty they're being accused of or the crime they're being accused of is worth €25.20. And that's the level of representation that they're getting. It's a very low fee paid to barristers to represent somebody in court when you take into account the CCTV footage. So it's an underfunded criminal justice system. And when you have something which is underfunded, even like the health service, the doctors and all the talent move away from the country or move away from the industry. And that's exactly what's happening here. I have students ring me who are ready to come down. Their final year exams are happening and they're saying, like, what's the point? And I said, look, hold it a second. You're 19, you're 20, you're 21. Some people are 50. Don't do what I did. Stay in school, get your qualification. Come down to the Bar of Ireland. Come down to the criminal courts. Get the best, advocacy skills you can get. You're going to work with the best colleagues you've ever met. You will change as a person and your profession will grow in relation to your experience when you're at the criminal bar. So if you're looking for the experience and the talent, come down. You will definitely get it here. You'll get the support. But if you're looking to make a living, I suggest that you have to go somewhere else. And that's where it is. So I'm telling people, stay in school, stay in college, get that qualification, ring me up, allow me to help you if I can. Let me give to you what people have given to me, which is support. But the advice I'm saying to people is, please don't waste your time and your resources staying in criminal law when you're working for these fees. It's not healthy for anybody. You're not going to have a family. So what it really is that the bar now, for people coming in, will only have people there who can survive at the bar. And that's somebody like me. Because my wife is working. I have a second job, which is keeping my first job going. But from a common sense point of view and from a business point of view, I may have to start, winding up this end of my practice fairly soon. But what's important is the 2nd of May, we can send that message out. What my colleagues are saying is that some of them, if this is not sorted on the 2nd of May or soon thereafter, they're going to take their names off the legal panel, leave the legal aid panels. They're not going to accept any criminal legal aid work, or they'll just leave doing criminal work altogether, or they will strike. So everybody has a different view of what they want to do, of what they think should be done. But when you have a profession where some colleagues are saying that we need to strike, we need to just walk out, or we need to take our names off the legal aid system, or we need not to do criminal law anymore, that has a very dangerous impact on society. It'd be the equivalent of going to a doctor where a top cancer specialist is saying, I'm not doing cancer work anymore. I'm not going to be involved in the health service payments. I deserve more. We deserve better. So when that experience leaves that end of a profession, what you're left with is good people who just don't have that experience. I think that's where the risk is.
I mean, that's
for everybody.
A very worrying situation, and I'm hoping that the protest, your May protest, really hammers that message home. That's your 3rd protest, as you said, but this has been going on since 2002, essentially, and it's astounding that, as you mentioned spin, it's the same old spin that you're hearing, depending on which departments handle it and which minister. That must be incredibly frustrating. And I know maybe it's an attitude, sure, we'll get to it, or, it seems to be lingering on for some time. In one of your articles, you refer to it as leprechaun legal aid, in the sense that Ireland is almost a laughing stock when it comes to other jurisdictions and legal aid rates. And you said your friends or colleagues in the UK are shocked by this. why is this not moving along? And it seems you've had to take action yourselves to do this. And if you weren't doing this and raising this issue and getting people to support you, it doesn't seem like it's a priority.
It's obviously not a priority for somebody. It's not a priority for somebody. Our representative body, the Bar Council, have had negotiations back and forth with the department and with ministers, And when you need to stand beside your professional body or stand in front of them to support them, so everybody coming out on the steps are members of the Law Library, and our representative body is the Bar Council. Yeah. And they have done, it appears, as much as they can. But now it's time for the members, whether you're a member of the Law Library, whether you're still a practicing barrister in crime or civil, now it's time for every barrister to stand on the steps and make themselves be heard. Quite simply what it is that Ireland, for the view, it appears that Ireland is the jukebox of failure. The records that are playing constantly are horrendous. I have them written down here: the cervical check, the hospital waiting list, the pyrite, the homelessness, the mother and baby homes. Recently coming on, I think it was RT last week, was the unregulated psychologist. We have waiting lists. We have a children's hospital, which is costing billions at this stage. And what it is that it just sends a very bad impression that Ireland can't do anything right. And now we have a legal system which is effectively collapsing at the moment, where people are saying, no more, we're not doing it anymore, and this is what we need to do. So we're asking everybody, whether you're a student, because students are asking me, can we come to the protest? And I said, okay. So if you're a student, come down on the 2nd of May to the Criminal Court of Justice in Dublin at 10 o'clock until 3, or your local courthouse, and come out and protest. And send a strong message to government to say that enough is enough, that this is my future. I'm 50. I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years' time, but at least I can leave, positive breadcrumbs behind me that people can follow to have a functioning criminal justice system. There are people who give you the silent support, and the silent supporters sing the loudest, But we're asking them to come out, be heard, stand up, be heard. Let government know this is not sustainable, because the reality is I may have somebody representing me in the morning when I'm in the criminal justice system, and I want the best. Yeah. And not only do I want the best, even if it's a junior barrister coming in to do, let's say, a procedural matter in court, maybe not to hear the case, but just to do a procedural matter, I want them to be able to have a future. And they're not going to be able to have a future if there's no more senior colleagues there with that experience to share. Because we all learn from what's in front of us. Yeah. We don't learn from what's behind us. So people in front of us are saying, look, this is my knowledge, I'm handing it down to you. But the reality is, maybe there's nobody to hand it down to. And that's where we are.
And I mean, you're calling on support there from across the board, because it's the legal system in general will be impacted. But I know has the newly appointed the High Court, the President of the High Court, Mr. Justice David Barneville, I think he was appointed last year, around September, October time last year. He was the former chair of the Bar Council, I believe. And he's been quite outspoken on this matter. Is it important for you to get people who are higher up the chain, I guess, in the legal community to be vocal and, to state that this is an unacceptable position? I'm sure that's valued support. It's
valued support. It's concerning that the President of the High Court has to come out. And just on the 24th of September, it was reported by Mary Carolyn, and I can read just a quote here, and she quotes that the former chair of the Bar Council strongly supports calls from the criminal bar and others for the unwinding of cuts between 30 and 70% made to criminal legal aid fees during the 2008 and 11 financial crisis. This is the President of the High Court. This is Mr. Justice David Barneville. So he came out and he spoke about his concern. He went on to say, and if I could just read a quote here so I don't misquote a judge, it says, people who do criminal work, whether they are defending or prosecuting, should be paid properly for what they do. I would have thought that it is something that is vital in any democracy operating on the basis of the rule of law. It's continued. Many public servants who had their pay cut have had it restored, but the criminal legal aid barristers are still paid rates, which I think is wrong. Some do district court work for a fee of €25, 20 cents for an appearance, which might be the only fee that some get for that day. You know, so when you have the president of the High Court coming out saying that there's a difficulty, something is wrong, it's time for people not only to listen but to listen properly.
Yeah, so
people are listening, but they're not taking the appropriate action. Yeah. So this protest that we're doing is by my colleagues, by myself, members of the bar, some people who don't practice at the bar, and this is purely us going onto the steps and saying enough is enough. If anybody wants to come out to support us, whether they're barristers, whether they're solicitors, students, even if they're government members or members of the judiciary, we welcome anybody to support us. But this is a serious matter for barristers. It's something that we have to take hold of ourselves. Yeah. We need to stand beside our professional body, and we need meaningful engagement from government. Our professional body has gone to many meetings. They've been on the radio many times, you know, but somebody is not listening. Somebody doesn't want this to change. We need to know who that somebody is, and we need to meet with them, and we need to not convince them, but just to convey the information that we're in a broken criminal justice system. And it looks like some of my colleagues, if things aren't sorted on the 2nd of May, will be following our colleagues in the UK.
Yeah.
And what that is strike
action.
And if anybody's asking me, do I support strike action? I do.
Yeah.
And would I go out and strike if needs be? I have no issue with that. I'll be there.
I mean, you're not faced with many more options if you're not being listened to and actions not being taken. So that's a celebration of failure is the kind of title of name attributed to this protest. 2nd of May. And we will, coming up to that, Darren, share any information you have about that, just to encourage people to come along to find out what it's about and to support you and your colleagues in this really important call to action. Just to go back a little bit there, you did mention that students often contact you. You know, to ask you about your work and obviously to explore it as an option for themselves. But I really want to say that I've been reading a bit about you, and you're incredibly active and enthusiastic in terms of encouraging young people to get into law in general and not just your area. Like you've covered it there. I mean, it must be very tough to, you know, promote the industry and show how people can overcome barriers or obstacles and start to get into law at any stage in life. You know, so you can break down those challenges, but also to balance that with, you know, what you've just mentioned, which is the reality of the income stream, and you know they really have to take that into account. But when you talk to young people and young students who I'm sure are very inspired by your journey, especially those who maybe left school earlier, you know, haven't followed the traditional career route in terms of their education, what comes up for you and what resonates with you when you first started to get into law, I suppose, at a later stage in your life? What barriers or obstacles did you have to get over, and was there any point in time when you thought, no, I'm gonna quit and I'm not gonna go any further?
But the obstacle I had to get over to go back to the education was confidence. And that's the first thing. I needed the confidence to say, just because you've no exams doesn't mean that you can become anybody you want to become. So when students come in, and I'm not selling to them only, oh, look, become a barrister. I'm selling to them, stay in school.
Yeah, okay.
And if you're not in school, go back to school, you know, and get your education. If you want to become a barrister, in my view, this is the best job I've ever done.
Yeah.
You know, financially, it's not the best job I've ever done. So when students come in, there's one barrister in the CCJ who said they became a barrister because of the talk I gave to them so many years ago. And that does my heart good for somebody to come in who are basically saying, well, look, you know, I'm following your lead here and I'm after bettering myself, and now I'm after becoming a barrister. And bettering themselves by, let's say, going back to school. They felt they needed that challenge. I think there's 3 other people in the system at the moment. Some are in the King's Inns. I think one is in the Law Society studying to be a solicitor. And I'm happy that my journey has, you know, been a bit of an inspiration for them, or maybe a bit of a, you know, a kick to get up and, you know, and to make things happen. But my heart breaks when you have students coming in who are saying, I want to be a barrister. I want to do what you're doing. I think it's great. I'd be thinking sometimes, am I selling them a false promise? And I'm not, because I'm being real with them to say, look, I didn't go to school and this is what happened to me and look where I am now.
Yeah.
But I'm just open with people to say, if you want to be the best advocate, come in here. If you want to work with amazing colleagues, if you want to stand in front of the judge, come in here, come into the criminal court, you know, you will get what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, within maybe 6 years, maybe 2 or 3 years, you may have to leave. And because financially it's not going to be worth it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the reality of where we are. But students are the future of any profession. But to actually think that their future has ended before they even begin in the criminal justice system it's a shame to think that we have a state, whether it was the last government led by Fianna Fáil, this government led by Fine Gael, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, we need an equal playing field for everybody, regardless what background they're in. You know, we have good barristers in the criminal courts, but we need them from all walks of life, because people who get themselves in difficulties are from all walks of life. You know, so we need everybody to give them the opportunity of to be the best that they can be through hard work, and not because they have to go away because they have no money, you know, because they can't survive. And that's where we are. You know, that's the sad reality of where we are. But on a positive note, students coming into the court is great. I love them coming in. It doesn't matter what school they're from. Some students prefer to come into the court and spend a week with me, or maybe spend a couple of days, you know. So I had students in who'd spend a week on a transition year, but in order to create more spaces, I'd only take them maybe for 2 days so I can give more students an opportunity to come in, you know. And it's great to see them going back to school, some of them who left early or some who were thinking of leaving. I had people in who left school very early, who were adults, and they come in and spend a bit of time with me in the court, and they go back studying again, you know. So I'm happy that my past has kind of played some role in their future, but the reality is at the criminal bar there is no future for anybody on rates as low as €25.20. Something has to be done. The government need to they need to actively do something. You know? There's no point in sitting around. I don't know why they won't turn to this. You know, is it a populism thing? I don't know. You know, is criminal defence legal aid? You know, is it not a popular thing? I don't know what it is, but we need a properly functioning criminal justice system. We need to uphold the rule of law. We need the Bar of Ireland and even the solicitors end, and we need to open to everybody to give them an opportunity to come in and practice. But we need people who are accused of criminal offences to have the best representation and the best resources open to them. I did a matter in the district court recently, and I got 28 files of CCTV footage. 28 files. One file was 30 hours long. Now, thankfully, the court granted me that certificate because I asked the court because of the amount of footage there. So it's 30 hours long, and that's before you meet anybody. You have to watch, you know, 28 files. One is 30 hours long, and you have to read and watch all this footage before you meet the client, so you know what they're being accused of. And then you have to have the consultation. You don't get paid for the consultation.
So Darren, in terms of, I know that you bring students into the courts and you give them talks. Is there a specific program around that, or what type of students are you bringing in?
Yeah, well, I bring students in kind of two ways. One is through the court services, where the court services will have schools in. So let's say, for example, there's a class in a school, they may have 20 or 30 people. They'll come in and I give them a talk, let's say at about 9 o'clock in the morning, for around 45 minutes to an hour, or sometimes at lunchtime from 1 o'clock until 2. And then I do the other ends where people, students personally come in and will shadow me for a week or 2 or 3 days. But on the court services one, when they ask a barrister to do the talk, they pay the barrister for doing that talk.
Right.
So before COVID, the fee was €40. So if I gave a talk to students for an hour, I get paid €40. And it's a great talk. Students have great questions. They run mock trials. They come into the courts, you know. So I'll be talking to a student now for €40, and 20 minutes later I'll be in the district court representing somebody for $25.20. But the good news is, after COVID, the court services had increased the fee. So now when I give talks to students, I get €55. And so I'll be talking to somebody now, and I get €55 for talking to them. And I tell them about the course. We run the mock trial, and you know, I don't mind going over the hour. We have a bit of fun and serious talks at the same time. But the reality is that I got a pay rise for talking to the students of €15. So I went from €40 to 55. But then I'm walking into court and I'm representing maybe a man or a woman or somebody who got into difficulty, and they're pleading guilty before the court, and I'll be standing up, opening documents to the court and asking the court to impose, the best possible punishment, not only to punish the person but to rehabilitate them as well. And for that, I get €50.40. So I'm actually talking to students about being me for €55, but then I'm going into court being me,
you,
€50.40, and then 25.20 for the first court appearance, and so that's where we are. I don't like to be bursting students' bubbles by telling them that that's the reality of where we are, but there's something drastically wrong.
There's something wrong. That none of this makes sense. And dare I ask, I don't know whether to ask this quite, but when you were a taxi driver, and if you didn't have another stream of income or any other support, would a barrister going in to do criminal defence in the district court make less money than you did when you were a taxi driver? And I'm not comparing the two scenarios, but the perception would be that a barrister would be earning a lot more than other professions. Your previous profession.
People have this view that when you're going to when you come out of the King's Inns, that there's a pot of gold waiting for you up in Parkgate Street. You just go up and you pick it up, And this is the thing, the leprechaun legal aid. You just come up, take the pot of gold, and you go back to Finglas where I'm from and live this rich, fulfilled life.
Legal aid lawyers.
It is absolutely not the case at all. I have some friends who do drive a taxi, and I represent some taxi drivers, and they are earning more than me. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I drove a taxi. I love driving a taxi, and they're earning more than me. And even there was one actual client who actually had to come into court, and he got a taxi in, and his taxi fare cost more than his representation. I know he doesn't pay for it through the legal aid system, So the balance is off. Taxi drivers, bus drivers, postmen, they provide a very important service. And my job as a taxi driver was to get somebody to go from A to B, which was under their direction. Can you bring me to Dublin, please? And then you bring them in, they tell you which way to go, and you give them the fee. But when you're in court, these are the allegations from the guard. You have to assess what the allegations are. You have to take your client's instruction, and you have to make that professional opinion. I was in St. James's Hospital yesterday. I had 2 appointments, and I was sitting in front of the consultant registrar, and good news, by the way, but I had to get his professional medical opinion on what we thought was wrong, and I can guarantee you that this gentleman, I'm not saying I'm at the top of my game, I'm only practicing since 2015, but this gentleman at the top of his game, he is not working a second job to keep the first job going, and he's not working for €25.20,
That's absolutely wild. It's wild.
Unfortunately, we have to leave the future behind us. I know that there's a kind of contradiction in terms, and leaving the future behind us means, for me, if things are to remain the same for students coming in, or for people like me who are there, or newly qualified barristers coming in, or people like me who are there, it's time to leave the future behind. And what I mean by that is, come in, get your advocacy skills, work around the best colleagues I've worked around with, and then just go off and do something else in the legal system, but don't practice criminal law under the criminal legal aid scheme. When people see this podcast, they'll be going, "Oh, this is depressing. I'm not going to be a barrister." I'm telling people, become a barrister. Come down. You'll be fascinated by what you see. You'll be fascinated by what you learn. But just in relation to remaining there and making a living, it's not going to happen. I think I got my daughter's ears pierced recently. I put it on my LinkedIn page. I think it was €40. For her ears to be pierced. I think I got a plug for a phone for Christmas time. I think it was €25. And I'm being paid $25.20 into district court. For the price of a snack box, I'm representing people. A snack box in a KFC, I'm representing people in the district court. And this is what it is that we're I'm sure that people, I know my daughter's saying, my dad goes to work. They tell me for €25.20. We went to Blanchardstown Centre yesterday, and my daughters were given €20 each to go into pennies, and to buy their little bits and bobs,
Yeah. Just finally, I'm speaking to you today after yesterday. I just was slightly depressed in reading the UK government's latest attack on activist lawyers and lefty lawyers and the do-gooders and all of the usual. I think we were called a blob of activist lawyers has been the latest from the UK Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. And of course, all of this focuses around the immigration crisis that they're talking about in the new legislation that they're trying to introduce. But I mean, we know that that's dangerous. We know that that's an attack on the rule of law, and that's already been discussed. But I'm just wondering, in your opinion, activism and the law, and I mean, you're an activist, there's no doubt about it in terms of in your general work anyway. I mean, you're defending people in terms of criminal defence and human rights as well. But just on a broader level, how important is activism and the law? I mean, you're obviously going out to protest now on behalf of you and your colleagues, but do you think the two work well together? And can we make effective change using activism through the law?
We can make change. We can change anything by being an activist. I mean, Vicky Phelan has changed women's health in Ireland through the cervical check. There's women alive because of Vicky Phelan.
Absolutely.
And there's women dead because of the failure of the state to protect women like Vicky Phelan. We have this where the Taoiseach came out recently. Mr. Bradford says he wants to remove, I think, the word woman from the Constitution. And it's an important thing, but we should be looking after women more.
Yeah.
We should be looking after women like Vicky Phelan, and even with the mother and baby homes, So it's easy to pick one area and say, look at what we're doing, sure, aren't we great? But we have to look at the areas that we failed in.
Yeah.
And it's through activism that we make those things better, but it's also through the loss of life. My wife is somebody who suffered because of cervical check. She didn't die, she had cervical cancer.
Yeah. She
had to have serious operations to avoid something happening in the future. So when you have an activist like Vicky Phelan or Emma Vic-Nahuna or Stephen Teep, they are changing the way health, the way the state look at women's health in future going forward. So why shouldn't we have activism in law? Because my activism in law is it's not in relation to whether we think this law is right or whether this law is wrong. When we go to the courts, we will argue that in front of the judge and we'll put our case forward and the court will decide. If we don't agree with the court, we go to a higher court. If the law is set and if it needs to be changed, we have to go to government, and maybe bring in legislative changes. But activism is very important of where we are today. I mean, we've activists all through our lives. We had peace in the north because of people being active, We had difficulties in many societies because people being active in a different way, So it's important that everybody in every industry has to be active. It's important that everybody stands up, they speak out, and that they be heard. But most important is they're listened to. Yeah. Because what's happening now is that we have conveyed information to the government. We're not going to convince them anymore. And based on that conveyance of information, we're going to be on the steps on the 2nd of May. Vicky Phelan has conveyed to the government the failures of the cervical check. Yeah. And based on her good work and based on valuable time away from her family, she has changed how women's health is dealt with going forward in Ireland. The failures of the state are huge. Yeah. It looks like with the jukebox of failure. The same scratch records, the same spin, the same nonsense. So being active in law is very important. I'm active because I want a better standard of living for my children. I want a better standard of living for, their children. I mean, they're only 12 and 13. They will be next month. They'll be 12 and 13. But I want a better future for them. Yeah. And I want a better future for all the students coming in behind us. So stand up, speak out, be active. People don't like when you stand up and you want to be counted. But stand up to speak out what's wrong. Do it the right way. Yeah. Do it the Vicky Phelan way. Approach government. I want change. So there shouldn't be any difference between an activist lawyer or an activist medical professional or an activist patient. If you're an activist and if you have something to work towards and you have the support of society or you have the support of people who are affected in society, well, then keep on moving forward. Change will only happen when government wants to bring about change. But it's up to us to press them on the issues. They're our government. We're the citizens. Yeah. We pay our taxes. We have friends coming in from different countries, from war-torn countries, let them come into a functioning society. It's not war-torn like where they've come from.
Yeah.
Let them come into a safe country that's safe medically. They can get the right health, medical care. They can come in to get the proper education. If they get into difficulty, they can be represented with the proper resources in court. And if they're unhappy, speak out. Mm-hmm. That's how we move forward.
Absolutely.
Speaking out doesn't bring you back. It means that you move forward. So I say to people, become an activist. Yeah. If you need support, talk to your friends about it. Mm-hmm. If people need support off me, if they're stuck with their exams, give me a call. I can't help everybody. I get lots of phone calls every week, tons of phone calls, and I love it. I love helping people. It's hard to balance the lot, but the way it is that if we can change through our activism at the bar, all my colleagues, if we can change and just ask government to unwind the cuts. Mm-hmm. I didn't cause the emergency, but I'm being treated as if I did. Yeah. Restore the payments to barristers, bring us in line with other public servants who have got their pay restored. We're paid by the criminal justice system. We're being criticised for being the lowest in that report I had read earlier on. With the president of the High Court who's concerned about where we are. So I think everybody in a way is an activist. Yeah. And some are more public than others. Like I'm on this podcast today, which will go out soon, and people will listen to it and agree with me, and maybe ring me and say, "Oh, fair play to you." Other people will disagree, But that's my view, and my view is the same view as everybody else's. I'm not representing my colleagues who are going to be on the steps with me, but we share similar views, and the similar view is that we're working for little or nothing. So become an activist. You'll save somebody's life, like Vicky Phelan did, or the many lives of others. And hopefully we can save the criminal justice system so we can have anybody who wants to be there come in and practice as a barrister, but more importantly, that they have the opportunity to do it. So what's wrong with being an activist? Mm-hmm. I don't consider myself an activist. I just consider myself who actively speaks out when I see a wrong. Yeah. That doesn't affect me. This is a breach of the rule of law. Uh-huh. I don't want to be part of that breach, a silent part of the breach. I want to be a vocal part of the breach, and that's where I am. Since we went on the steps a couple of years ago. My colleague, Luigi Ray BL, has done 2 reports in relation to the underfunding of criminal legal aid in the circuit court. When it comes to disclosure, now your listeners may not know, well, what's disclosure? I mean, when somebody is charged with a criminal offence, they'd be given a book of evidence which may contain 10 pages of statements of what the guards say has happened. But that book of evidence is made up of maybe reports from other people. There could be CCTV footage. So although the 10 pages are there you have to read, there could be boxes of evidence that you have to read as well. There could be tons of CCTV footage that you have to go through. And unfortunately that the barrister doesn't get paid for that. Now, through Luigi Ray's activism, there is Department of Justice now, you have to apply to them to be paid the money to read the material that they say you must read in order to properly defend your client. So the activism has worked there. Yeah. It's starting to move where people are being paid for the work that they do. They're not being properly paid. But that activism has changed the course of how people are paid going forward. So become an activist. Why not?
Why not? So slow movement, but movement nonetheless. And no better person, Darren. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you here today to give a real honest insight into your work, the work of your colleagues, the vital work of your colleagues and the challenges that face you. And hopefully this celebration of failure protest, 2nd of May, between 10 and 3, where is it, Darren? Where do people?
It starts at 10 o'clock in the morning and it's going to finish at 3, and it's in courthouses all around the country. So some people may not be able to make it to Dublin, so they'd have it their local courthouse. But I think that the main part will possibly be in Dublin because that's where many barristers are. But if I could take the opportunity to say to all my colleagues in the Bar of Ireland and members of the Law Library, come out and support us. If you have any questions about the protest, give me a call. Myself and my other colleagues have no difficulty. We're saying to the Law Society of Ireland for Solicitors is that support us, ask all your members to come out. I'm calling on the Bar Council to say, ask all the members to come out and to support us in this day of protest. It's a celebration of failure by the state, they have done nothing meaningful in order to fix this. We deserve better. Our nation deserves better, and anybody coming before the courts deserves better.
Okay, well, look, we wish you all the best. We're behind you. We'll help in whatever way we can and share this really important message. And we look forward to seeing the results following this protest. Thank you so much, Darren, for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.